Good afternoon. Today is the City Charter Commission meeting. Today is June 5th. Before we start, I'd like to maybe talk a little bit about how we want to proceed tonight. My thought was to set a timeline for tonight so we know how much time we have today as we go through these discussion points. What do people think? Do we want to set this for an hour or an hour and a half? I'm not willing to go any longer. I think we'll be burnt out by then. Thoughts?
Hour and a half?
Hour and a half is
7
okay
o'clock,
with me.
7 o'clock max. Maybe we'll see where we're at 6:30. Okay. We don't have to get it all done tonight. So, let me get the right packet up here.
Chairman Schultz, maybe the other
Yes.
thing we just point out is we do have new equipment now, and rather than just be seen on TV, one thing we do request is that you put the microphone close and talk into the microphone, because that's we have had for years complaints from citizens saying we can see you but we can't hear you. So pull the microphone, get it within like 6 inches away, and as I'm prone to do when I'm sitting up there, I'll turn to my left and I'll turn to my right, and my father chews me out the next day and says, I couldn't hear a word you said.
I think
So-
especially if you have a soft voice too, to really speak into the mic tonight. Okay. With that, let's move ahead. We have minutes from April 24th, 2018. I'd entertain a motion to approve those.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion on any of the minutes? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. My understanding is or we asked last time was for this commission to submit areas of discussion for the charter, and people have done that. So if people want to, I think we should just move right into that, unless, Brian, you have other items you want to talk about?
No, I think what we tried to do, I think, with the agenda was to set up the review of all the comments that were submitted. If there were any that were pretty easy, like putting a period and, page 62 behind the word from, that we can tentatively approve those. There are probably some that are on here that might be not so much for the charter, but for an ordinance per se. So we could remove those and when we get to those. And then you've got the items that you want to discuss further. You may say, we don't have enough information, or we have enough information, let's make that change. Then we can identify who's going to do the research, whether it's the city attorney's office or staff, and then we'll bring that back for the next meeting. So it's kind of identify what we can do, identify what we aren't going to do, take that off the table, and then focus on the ones that we think are important.
So some of these we'll get to.
That's how the agenda's set up.
Roger, any comments on your end?
Yeah, I prepared the discussion points, and what I tried to do, thank everybody who submitted questions or issues. What I tried to do was arrange them sort of in the same sequence as the charter. Some of the initial ones were just kind of overall questions, and then I just tracked through it, so if we wanted to go through the charter starting from page 1, to the extent there's anything we need to talk about, we would just track through it that way. As we're discussing these particular points, I'll be making notes. We'll see how far we get tonight before we decide to break. And when we conclude tonight, depending upon how far we've gotten, if we're only halfway through this and we think we need to do another meeting, we can just pick up again wherever we leave off. If we've got a lot of stuff accomplished, I could actually make some revisions to the charter that I could present to the next meeting, so we could just sort of see how it goes. But I was just trying to, and I tried to incorporate everybody's questions onto this worksheet. So if I missed anything, I apologize, but I tried to list everything that anyone had raised. And as Brian pointed out, some of these things just are more appropriate for ordinances. Some of them are very minor typographical details. Some of them are some pretty major changes. So I'm sure that'll determine how much time we spend talking about it.
And we may have to flip back and forth between, obviously, this recommendation as well as our charter. So the charter is available on your main screen over to the left, I believe, in the upper corner.
Right, I
So
think
if you need to
everybody has
open-
been provided with a paper copy
with a
too,
pa-
if they
you have a
wanted
paper
that.
copy, or
Right.
if you want to flip online to see if there's an area that we really get into some discussion on. Just a reminder again that we are all an equal voice here, and I want to make sure that this is open for discussion. You've all been appointed on an equal basis to talk about these issues. So I'm looking for feedback and discussion on all these topic items as we go through. And we'll vote if we need to, if we get to, I don't know if we can vote one at a time, or we'll vote on, I guess we'll just kind of see how it goes, because some of these are really insignificant, but important. We have to vote on a change for each of these.
That would be an appropriate way of doing it, just because of the number.
So we can actually use your work and just say section 1, if we all agree this should be called the New Ulm City Charter, which I don't think there's going to be a lot of agreement on, we could just make a motion and approve that particular one.
Right, and then I would make a note of that that's been decided by the commission, so that when we put together the final recommendations for the council, then you'll have a chance to review all those and make sure they're consistent. But that would just be a way of kind of taking care of the work that we need to do. So
Okay.
that, and I think that would be, with a number of things, it'd be appropriate. If you want to vote on them, if you don't, if no one moves to make the change or to have the language changed, then that would just no action would be taken. We'd cross it off the list and move on to the
So I
next
think that's
item.
what I'm going to do, is we can move through these. I'll just ask for a motion, and we'll just move them on.
Sure.
Okay?
Yep.
Is there anybody that brought items they wanted to discuss that are not on this discussion points? Not so far. Okay? All right, then let's get going. Certainly, I'll go back to item number 1. Is there any concerns with this change? If not, I'd entertain a motion to move.
Well, let me, if I may be heard in this.
Yes.
This was a question posed, considering the way that the charter is currently titled, would it be more appropriate to call it New Ulm City Charter? This is a home rule charter city. When you look at other cities that are operating under the home rule arrangement, this is the way they have their charter titled. So my recommendation would be that we leave it as is.
Oh, to leave it as is. So, okay.
Yeah.
I would second that.
Okay.
For that particular purpose. You have statutory charters, you get home rule
Statutory
charters, and then
cities.
there's 2 statutory charters. So this defines ours as a home rule charter, and there's no question.
What does that mean, home rule charter?
What's
What
that?
does that mean? I think of home rule as I'm being invaded.
Home rule in this particular situation states that the community created this document on their own. State statutory charters, they're prepackaged. The state says, you want to be a Class A charter? Here you go. You want to be a Class B charter? Here you go. You want to be a home rule? Somebody sat down, just like this group right here, and said, what do we want to have in here? What are our corporate powers and rights and obligations? And so it's all done at the local level. So home rule just means we created it at the local level. The other ones, you can go to the state statute, and you pull them right out of the statute and say, do it. You know,
Okay.
we can choose to have a mayor and 5 councilors and a council president. That's not a statutory city council makeup.
Right, the-
Statutory city council
Yeah,
makeup
the-
is,
And I think usually it's referred to as statutory cities of different classes, depending upon the
Right.
size. And as Brian has said, the state sets out kind of a default charter, that if you don't adopt your own, this is what you're going to have. By having a home rule charter, that's all it means, is that we're deciding what the charter is going to be for our city. So,
right,
Okay,
Good
thank you.
question, Sue, though. Thank you.
no invasions.
no,
So I don't hear anybody's jumping up and down. We want to change it based on that info? None? All right, we'll move on to number 2 then. D. Delete italicized amendments.
As I understood this, if you look at the existing charter, I'll try and find an example. I'm just opening it towards the end, like on page 49. I believe the question had to do section 259. It's got a note about 2 different amendments that were made, one in 1982 and one in 2011. That's something, and it's similar to the second one, number 3, the question about, we've got a whole list of repealed sections. Why is that in there? Why is that taking up all this space? That's something, again, that I think you will see in most city charters, and I think it's done for interpretation and historical purposes so that there is a record of when a change was made and, or when something was repealed, because somebody might pull out, a 1915 version of the charter that they found at home or in the library, and they're relying on that. And well, when was this changed and why? So I think it's a good idea to have it in there. I know it seems like a lot of unnecessary language to be in place, but it's the same thing when you look at our state statutes. When you look at them, many times they'll have repealed in entire chapters. It'll be a whole list of statutes and then just repealed. It's just kind of the way things are done for record keeping.
Okay.
So your recommendation on number 2 is?
Both number 2 and 3, I think we should take no action, just kind of leave the same format that we've used.
Anybody have any disagreements with that?
I just think it reads better if the numbers were consistent, but I understand what you're
For
saying.
history's sake?
Mhm.
Yeah. Okay.
Mr. Hippert, have you ever seen it where, you have like the official document like this, but you actually have a readable, cleaned up version?
Well, what I have seen, and we could certainly format it that way, is they will have the existing provisions of the charter to start out with, everything that's currently on the books. And then they'll have a separate section towards the end, repealed provisions. And that then would, all that stuff, it wouldn't be included in the body of it, but if anyone ever needed to know, that information would be there. So you wouldn't be flipping through it and find pages of sections that were repealed. So we could certainly take a
Move it to
look
the
at doing
back of
that.
the
one. Yeah,
document?
right. Would that help, do you
That
think, with the
would.
readability?
Yep.
So,
I like that idea too, because sometimes you are scrolling for a long ways and there's 10 pages of repealed stuff
Yes.
and you want to get to your data.
Yep.
So
okay, make a note of that.
we don't need a motion on that, I don't believe. That's just a format issue.
Yes, yeah,
So I
yeah,
think
and that
we're
would be
okay.
that way when we put it together for you to look at,
Right.
so.
Okay, we're doing pretty well. Let's move on to item number 4, and I have a little additional information on that, but this is regarding wards and precincts, and the issue is, should precincts be eliminated? Would reducing the possible polling places to 4, 1 for each ward, which is available in statute 240B.16, precincts define polling places, wards define city council members. Section 3 allows council to reduce precincts from 8 to 4, Section 15 elections. So Brent, Roger, I don't know if you have more on that. I did talk to our county person on this particular topic, which I could read her answer.
Okay.
You want-
What, this was my way of trying to summarize the information, try and make it more understandable. Basically, the wards and the precincts cover 2 different issues. The wards identify the number of counselors that are elected to the city council, 1 from each ward, so it's representative from different areas of the city. The precincts deal more with how we conduct elections and how many places we could have polling at. So, initially it's set up for the 8 precincts, 2 for each ward. Just this year, we made some changes to consolidate the number of voting places. But that's something where the precinct just determines an area for voting. And that's something, it's not just for city elections. I mean, it would be for, any elections that are being conducted. So it's really 2 different issues. And I guess just my own personal feeling is that if you have multiple precincts, you at least have got some proportionality. You've got more opportunity to kind of divide things up instead of just lumping everything together. So I don't know that a lot would be gained or frankly lost if we were to reduce it.
I think we'd have to work with the county though as well, because right now, 2 of our wards, the precincts are split between county commissioners. So.
That's the
it's half
letter
and
I
half,
got
So you
from-
couldn't just combine them and without working with the county, I think,
We
or
would have to
redistricting.
coordinate that, right,
Yeah.
okay, okay.
I could read the letter from Gene Prochniak, who is the county auditor
I haven't
treasurer,
seen
which
that.
kind of follows what you're already saying, but as per our discussion this morning regarding having only four wards within the city, I really think we've already done this from the perspective of your council representation and polling locations. So for the most part, we've accomplished that part. The precincts relate more to the commissioner districts within the city. We will be addressing redistricting after the 2020 census is completed. If the city wishes to pursue further, my recommendation would be to visit with the city attorney or the League of Minnesota Cities. The Secretary of State's office might be another resource if you want to continue researching this topic. I hope that this is somewhat of an explanation that will provide some guidance as you make revisions to your ordinances. Please let me know if I can be further assistance. Gene Proctor. So,
Well, if it, to the extent it could affect what we're doing at the county level, we probably don't with an election coming up. We probably
Right,
don't.
and we'll
wanna-
likely address some of it when we redistrict in 2022, because we more than likely will with the population growing on that side of town. Have to shift lines to realign the populations in each ward, but
Could I call him this, could I
In-
ask who selected Harmon Park for our polling place? Was that
Kim and I
you?
came up with that one. We've reviewed it. It'll work.
Okay.
All right, in a perfect world, if the city wards were enough to have 2 full county board members or 3 full county board members, then everything would work out. We could get rid of precincts. But the fact is when we have 2.5 potential county board members coming from the city of New Ulm, we need to have the precinct. And so, time will tell. I don't believe 2020 we're gonna have we're gonna have a perfect world again and say, oh, this fits just perfect. It's just not gonna happen. So, I don't know that it ever will, but it's something we can look at in the future.
And we're a standing commission, so we could always
Yeah.
revise it if they were really
Propaganda.
reasonable. We might
I-
have to anyway.
And looking at number 4, I would not support changing that. I think it's important that voting be as inclusive as possible. So I like the 2 precincts in each ward.
Good.
Mm.
Okay. All right,
we all
so-
agree just to table that one?
Yeah.
All right, let's move on. Number 5. This one's very important. We're missing a comma between powers, functions, line 5. I don't know. I kind of object to moving commas around.
Think we can do that one?
Grammatical matter? Are we sure that there's missing? It's not supposed to be there?
I think,
I read section 4 over and over and over, trying to figure out what it meant.
you couldn't find
And
it?
it
Or,
was,
where the
I
comma?
was like, whoa. After the 3rd read, I began to understand what it was saying. So the wording is difficult for me there, but I'm,
So Roger, you want, do we,
We'll make a note to insert that.
well, we have to,
We need a motion for
we'd
that?
have to have a motion. This will
Okay.
be the first one we've changed.
Right.
So do I have a motion to add that comma?
Move to add the missing comma between the words powers and functions, line 5.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. Any other discussion on this item?
Who was the
Hearing
second?
none, all in
I'm
favor
sorry.
say aye.
Aye.
I second.
Opposed? All right, moving on to item number 6, nomination for office. Duplication requirement for signers of petition for city council from ward affected. Use the term ward counselor, not city councilor. I think that's just an old term. Recommendation is delete the second reference and obviously use city councilor versus ward counselor. Any duplicate requirement for signers of petition. Can you talk about that, Roger, just for a little bit?
Yeah, I think it shows up twice. If you look on page, I'm looking at page 4 of the charter, in the middle of the second paragraph of section 18, in the case of a ward counselor, the signers of the petition must be registered voters residing in the ward. And then if you go on the next page 5, again, in the middle of that page, where a nomination petition is filed nominating a candidate for the office of ward counselor, versus signing such petition shall be residents of such nominee's ward at the time of signing the petition. So it does seem like that's duplicate language. So if there's going to be a petition for electing a counselor, obviously it needs to be signed by people who reside in that ward, but it's showing up twice.
Right, so this is basically a cleanup, just to get rid of that second reference and,
That
Get
would
rid
be
of-
my suggestion, and then if you want to change the label from ward counselor to city counselor,
I think
which
we
is-
did that last time. We must have just missed this one when we were cleaning up. So anybody have any objection to cleaning that up? So I'd entertain a motion for deleting the second reference and using city councilor versus ward councilor, maybe throughout the document in case we find another one.
Sure.
Maybe that would help if people are okay with that motion. Just an old term.
So moved.
We got a motion? Do we have a second?
Second.
Any questions or any more discussion on this item? All those in favor say aye.
Okay?
Opposed? Motion carries. Moving on to number 7. Ranked choice instant runoff voting. Delete provision for primary elections. Have a discussion.
Yeah, that was one of the topics that came up. That would be an option. That would be something that we could consider if we wanted to do the ranked choice voting. It's something that would be available as an option.
It's relatively new.
Yes, it is. It
It's
is.
only been out a couple of years, I think, that it's been used in Minnesota.
And there was a system in place, I believe, in Duluth several years ago. The Supreme Court threw out. They held it was unconstitutional. The current methods of doing it, I think, have been held to be constitutional. As I understand it, I believe basically the way it works is you have your ranked voting, and if you don't have someone who's gotten a majority, what they do is they throw out the votes for the person who got the least, and then they go and see what that might have done to the ranking. So, it's a way of, if you have a lot of candidates, it's a way of kind of getting a consensus on it. I know there's public arguments in favor of it, there's public arguments against doing it that way, so.
I just checked on the website with the Minnesota League of Women Voters, of which I'm a member today, and found that they do have a position supporting
Oh, you do?
this,
Okay.
right? And I didn't take a lot of time, but I know there'd be some research behind, if they take a position, they did a lot of study of the issue, and there'd be a lot of information there. So if this is something we're interested in pursuing, I don't think that it's something that we vote on, decide tonight. I think it's
I
something
agree.
that's gonna require some study and defining what it means, and probably some feedback from the public also, before maybe making such a significant change, because it would be a big deal. But I'm interested in checking into it. I mean,
Talking
it's
more about it?
potentially a progressive idea.
The one thing that I don't know, and Linda, if the league had any information on it, what do you do if there's a statewide primary? You're still gonna be involved in that, right?
Well, this would only be for this
Would
we
be
would,
for
this would only
local.
be for counselor.
Right,
Yeah.
for a local mayor, et cetera. I
Oh, you're
suppose.
saying what happens if they're using ranked choice voting instead?
Well, no, but I'm saying if we're gonna have a primary anyway,
Oh, I understand.
then, you would still have.
Yeah, I'd like to know a little bit more about it myself. My little bit of knowledge of it is normally when there's a lot of people that apply for a particular council position, but we don't really have that issue. We have the other side, we don't get enough people to apply. So the ranked choice, if there's only one or two choices, I don't know.
I think
but-
it's more inclusive, and I like the fact that it gives more power to the vote. It eliminates primaries. I too am a member of the League of Women Voters, and in looking at their website and the research that they have done, I think it is something that we should think about. And I know they're doing it in the cities. Some of the cities are doing this, and the people that pulled away from the voting thought it was very positive. They felt that their vote actually had more power. So it's maybe
I'm
something
certainly
to
willing
look
to take
into.
a more look at it. Everybody else, we want to maybe table this one and have everybody kind of do their own research on this, or do you have Linda, would your group come in and do a presentation, or is there a neutral person who could come in and do a presentation for us on ranked choice?
Possibly.
I would guess
Sure.
there's somebody from your organization, not local, but maybe even statewide, that,
Well, at a minimum, I think we could, Sue read the same information I did, we could probably pull up that research that they did. The study process would have been quite lengthy for a statewide
Right.
position to have been taken, and they would have looked at a lot of data. We could at least pull that out to start with and distribute it, and then
Okay.
kind of decide from there maybe what more we want to do.
I think, because it'd be a huge change for our community, a lot of education, and not that we can't do that, so. So we'll table this one, and maybe we can ask that, can you get that information to Nicole so she can get that? Are you gonna be the distributor of data?
Either Roger or Nicole, when we put the
Okay.
agenda together, we'll put
All
it
right.
all in.
Great, thank you, that's good discussion on that. Anything else from anybody on this? Okay. Number 8, boards, commissions, and department charter. I'm not sure what the 82 and 88 mean on here.
Oh, those would be the sections from
Sections of
the
the,
charter.
I think it maybe, does this rely back to my question about, do we need as many, that one part of the charter only talks about a few commissions.
What I did was to, in the first box to the left, those are the boards or commissions that are established under the charter. The one to the right, under the code, those are all established under the city code. So we would not have anything to do, well, the PUC is established under, is mentioned in both, but otherwise, everything in the box to the right, human rights, et cetera, that's all under the code. So that's just the council only. It's got nothing to do with the charter of this commission. The others are, in section 26 of the charter, says that, you know, the city can set up whatever additional commissions, which is where the code comes in. So I guess the question here is, I think primarily related to the Board of Health, which, as I understand it, has not really existed or been active for years.
We used it on several occasions.
Okay.
Let's talk about that a little.
why
Actually,
don't you tell them?
testimonial in court trying to get dwellings torn down that are uninhabitable. I believe 7, 8 years ago, we actually had to bring the 2 doctors that were on the board together for it, and we had their testimonies for in court, so it is used on occasion.
Okay.
Right.
I mean, very rare they have to meet once a month, but they're there if you do need them, and it did help in the court system, having our own Board of Health and those 2 testifying.
It does carry a lot more
Yeah,
weight.
it carries a lot of weight.
But, and I think one would kind of think back when the charter was, you know, probably first initiated, it probably carried more weight and was more active. Now with, you know, building codes and Department of Health and all the other things that we have going on, it just becomes a little bit, and plus we don't have, you know, large outbreaks of, you know, measles or, you know, chicken pox like we, you know, had back in the day. So,
Now it's pretty much if we have abandoned buildings or businesses where they become infested with like rodents, I would assume, right? Pretty
Right.
much.
These were very, 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 very uninhabitable. Very.
But not safety issues
No,
because.
safety is handled by the
Public health
fire
is gonna-
inspector or building code, but this was actually public health,
right.
detrimental to citizens. And when we did have to call them together, it carried a lot of clout.
Okay.
That we did have one and their testimony was used.
So their authority did what? To tear the building down or?
Pretty much so.
Board it up?
It's uninhabitable, it needs to be tore down,
Okay.
raised.
That's true. I mean, if, you know, fortunately, we haven't had to go to court on that, you know, lately, but if we do, I need to have witnesses that, you know, would be qualified to testify at that sort of a hearing. And there would be no one better than people from the Board of Health. Because they're appointed, they're, you know,
And how
have
many-
some authority.
How many people we have appointed? Just
It says 3, one of whom is supposed to be a doctor. I don't know who the actual.
Yeah, I think there's 3.
Do they also police the restaurants?
No,
That's Brown
Department.
Nicollet.
Brown Nicollet and Department of Health.
Okay.
So I think it came up because nobody really heard much action from this group for a long time, but that's obviously why we haven't had a report or an issue.
Do they meet regularly?
I think they meet as
needed.
That's why.
As all boards and commissions, if there's nothing on the agenda, or you don't meet.
Yeah.
Right.
If they're called, it's because of very site-specific. But, you know, as I said earlier, back in the 50s, it wasn't such a site-specific thing. It was,
Yeah.
you know, putting the red tag on the house and saying, you're quarantined, you can't leave your house. I mean, that's how it was used,
Well, I
you know,
think
back in
if
the
you,
40s
if you
and
look at,
50s.
yeah, it's in section 82, it indicates their primary authority is enforcing the ordinances, and then other state laws that might apply to New Ulm. But I think what's changed is probably from when this was first put in, if you look at the growth in just monitoring at the county, the state, the federal level, all of the agencies, the FDA, I mean, you know, whatever, PCA, who are doing things that never existed before they were created. That's where these guys would have come in. So a lot of their work, other agencies are taking care of, but if we get the kind of situation Dave has mentioned, it would really be good to have a board.
I would agree. I suppose if one of us counselors got a call on a serious issue, that's where we would probably
Yeah,
go
good.
next.
Yep.
We would probably make a request that they meet and the information be provided by whoever. Okay, all right.
Can I ask a question, Roger? So why do you think these 4 boards were mentioned in the charter versus all of them, the others that are listed simply in the code?
Well, my hunch is probably when they originally drafted the charter, they weren't, I don't know if they had a concept of human rights, for one thing.
Or safety?
Planning, I mean, they didn't even have zoning until the 60s. You know, so a lot of those things just kind of came up. So I think it's just how things have evolved over time. But they probably thought, well, we're going to need a fire department, a police commission, a board of health, and they've had public utilities for a long time. So, you know, those things they probably thought were essential. That's probably why they started out with those.
So should any of them move over?
I don't know what the advantage would
that
be,
was
or
my
the,
next
or the
question.
disadvantage, I guess. You know, it's something where the, the council, you know, or the citizenry has got the ability to, you know, petition to make changes. I guess I think they're generally working now. To the extent all of these others are, you know, created by the council, if they think they're no longer serving a useful purpose, the council can terminate those commissions that are created under the code.
Wasn't there a commission developed for some of the gifts given to us by Germany? That's not on here though, right?
Yeah, that was a committee, not really a.
Committee, not
board
a
or
commission?
It really wasn't part of this list right here. I think what you see, quite honestly, is the concern back in the 50s when the initial charter was created was, you know, health was important, fire departments were important, the police were important. I mean, they were held at really high levels. You know, the police, you know, at that time were dispatched in essence by the mayor, you know, in times of turmoil, you know, whatever. It is like a miniature little army. So I can understand why these things are listed as important as they are. You know, the PUC was in charge of gas, water, electric, sewer. I mean, that's an important entity. You know, recreation, some of these other things came up through time as almost like safety is like a subunit of the police and fire. You know, they're not talking about police and fire, they're talking about sidewalks and street lighting and, you know, all those ancillary things in our community. I don't know that there's any reason to have them here, but they got to be somewhere, you know, because we have those entities. The fact that the PUC is in both speaks to, and it's almost duplication, speaks to how important they felt that it had to be in the charter and in the ordinance form.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it could easily just say, section 22, that the city council may establish by ordinance any boards and commissions as needed, and keep it as simple as that. And then we would just have to create the, you know, Board of Health and the fire and the police and put them in ordinance form. And then it gives total flexibility to the city council. Now, they can do whatever they want with their commissions, but the charter says you will have a fire department.
Right.
It's kind of the most basic public services.
Yep.
That,
Yeah.
you know, any community needs.
Your core, some of your core services, I guess.
Well, but the charter also authorizes the city council to eliminate departments or commissions, so there kind of isn't any reason why we list specific ones, which just says, these are the commissions we have, and the city council can make more, and the city council can eliminate them. So
Yep.
why do they need to be in their charter? I'm not saying that I. advocate
Established
taking
by
them out.
it, Counselor.
Sorry?
So this means that if the
Oh.
council establishes them, they can eliminate them, but they can't change the charter.
Okay,
Unless they would vote to change the charter, then they could. So,
It seems you stay as flexible as you can with this document. But there's always gonna be these named in the document,
right. Yep.
so.
So hearing that, I'm not hearing anybody jumping up wanting to move this.
well, are there any commissions that we want to put into that position, that we say these have been created and we don't want them to be something that we want them in the charter so that the city council can't take them away,
There you go.
such as human rights? I mean, are there any others that we would recognize as, it sort of reflects the importance of the
Yes.
commission?
Mm-hmm. It does, it sets them apart.
I would like to see human rights added to 22
Okay.
charter.
Any others? Want to make that a motion, Sue?
Yes, I will make that a motion that we add human rights to the commissions as listed in section 22.
Okay. Do we have a second on that?
I second it.
Second, any other discussion on this?
Yeah, I guess I've got a couple questions about that. So what does the Human Rights Commission in New Ulm actually do? I mean, do they have any authority to, you know, so-and-so's not treating their employees, well or being discriminatory? Do they, what is their hammer or?
Authority,
Yeah.
jurisdiction?
I think the crux of the human rights is to educate the community's citizens on human rights issues. If there is a discriminatory act that occurs and rises to an abuse of human rights status, we contact the state of Minnesota and they basically take it from there. Technically, if we were skilled in dealing with those human rights issues, we could do them at the local level.
Yeah.
But since we are not, that well versed in the ins and outs and the legalese of those particular situations, the state of Minnesota Human Rights takes those and will do the investigation.
Now,
So-
the code says the purpose of the commission is to secure for all citizens equal opportunity in employment, housing, public accommodations, public services, and education, and to secure full participation in the affairs of this community by assisting the State Department of Human Rights in implementing the Minnesota Human Rights Act, and by advising the city on long-range programs to improve human relations in the city.
So does this group meet every month? And they,
Is there anybody here part of that commission right now? No? Okay.
is there something published in the paper from their meetings or?
I don't know that their minutes
I
are
think I
necessarily
vaguely
published.
have some memories about it, but I'm trying to understand, it's kind of, are they kind of like the Board of Health that there's not a
they're-
lot to talk to about what goes on in town, or is there actually
have-
quite a bit?
They have regular meetings. They're televised like the other commissions.
Yeah, they're pretty active.
Okay.
Yeah, they've done
They-
some education. And
They've got a small budget of roughly $4,000, of which they utilize that for the human rights posters, the elementary school poster program where somebody might, get $50 or $25 or $10 for, first, second, third place. So they're trying to educate and instill into our youth, the human rights issue.
And they have dealt with some complaints in our community from the past, and it's
Yes.
been a while. I don't know when their last one was, but they
We'll,
have
we'll,
dealt with
we'll get
complaints.
the initial contact. Usually my office gets the contact, and then we'll do a preliminary investigation. And then we'll send all the information up to the state of Minnesota, and then, like I say, their attorneys take over at that point. Because if it's an employer, we're just, we're not versed in those issues, and so they kick it up to those entities or those individuals that are responsible for those particular investigations and actions. And usually we don't hear after that, what happens out of that particular situation. We just kick it up and they take it from there. It might be somebody who applied to a rental house and got told, no, I'm not going to rent to you. They complain to us, and then we take care of it, the investigation on ours, and get the who, what, where, when, why, and then it goes up to the state.
Okay, other questions on this topic?
So if the Human Rights Board does get moved over to the charter, does that mean that the definition or responsibilities that Roger just read also needs to go into the
No,
charter?
I think, well, I mean, if you really wanted to safeguard it, you could move those provisions into the charter. I suppose if you were worried about mischief, even if the commission had to exist because of the charter, if the council were to amend the ordinance to take away duties or authority, it could gut, its ability to do things. I don't imagine that's likely to happen. But that, again, would be a judgment call. But I think it does emphasize the importance of it if you move it into the charter as a mandatory commission.
So it would remain in the code as well?
It could have been, just like there's these provisions on the PUC that are in the code, they kind of duplicate, but it fleshes it out a little bit more. So I think it wouldn't be at all inconsistent to add it to the charter, but leave the code language intact.
So that kind of answers my question. My next one was going to be, should we get rid of the PUC so it's not duplicate on both sides? Does it need to be on both sides? But I hear you say it's more fleshed out on
Yes.
the commission side, so we can have them on both sides.
Yeah.
Okay.
I see that, I think you explained at our first meeting that the charter is kind of like our constitution.
Yes.
So the charter is going to be more broad and sweeping, and is also going to include things that we want to be less flexible about allowing to be removed.
Correct.
Whereas our ordinance and other rules might be more specific to
right.
details. So to
Exactly.
say that we want the Human Rights Commission to be a charter commission suggests that we're saying we want that to be there. We don't want it to be something that can be taken away.
Correct.
And to the extent we put detail, then that just describes the detail that we don't want to
Yep,
have
I agree.
removed.
Any other questions on this? We have a motion and a second to move the human rights over to section 22. Hearing no other questions, I'll call the question. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Moving on to section number 25, discussion point on when would an appointive office be filled by the same person? And
Now,
it's-
this was
it's
one of the,
confusing language, isn't
one of
it?
the questions that
Yeah.
came up. 23 describes the appointive offices, which are city manager, city attorney, finance director, and then such other officials as may be required under this charter. And then 25 talks about combining offices. In the discretion of the council, could be filled by one and the same person. So I guess that would mean, and the question was, well, how could that happen, or when could that happen? You know, you go to law school, you can be city attorney and finance director. You know, whatever, it's just, that would be right now the kind of things. And then there are additional appointive offices, I suppose. I mean, I know people on the Board of Health, that's an appointed office. I mean,
Well, the one that comes directly to mind would be, we used to have a city clerk, and then we had a city treasurer, and then you have a combined city clerk treasurer.
Yeah.
And then we have a finance director, which holds all the powers of the clerk treasurer. So there could be situations where you sit and say, yeah, we're going to appoint one person to two particular things because they join together. Another example might be, is kind of out there a little bit, but City of Mankato combined their police department and their fire departments. And in essence, they created a public safety officer who's in charge of both the fire and the police. You know, one person has the duties for both of those entities. It could be that they just recreated everything, their whole ordinance, and just redid everything. But they could have said, okay, Bob, you're going to be in charge of the police and the fire. And so those situations do, or could occur. They don't occur very often.
But the charter allows you to do that now.
Charter allows us to do that.
So what
yeah.
is the discussion? That we can't do that? We don't want to allow it,
I
or?
think there was just a question about how that would come about. Why would you have one person filling those roles? And I think, Ryan, and I think, most cities used to have the clerk, the treasurer, really two different duties, one monitoring the money, the other doing an awful lot of administrative stuff, and it just made sense to combine them. And so we just have a different label, and that's why some cities are doing it with the fire chief and the police chief, too.
It probably needs to stay. If we were ever into some real serious budget issues and got horrific and we really had to cut and combine offices, we probably need this to stay in. Hopefully it'll never happen, but if it did and we had to consolidate.
And I don't think there's ever been a situation that I'm aware of in our town's history where it's really been abused, or people have thought it had been abused, where you have one person doing everything. I mean, that's just not gonna happen,
No.
So anyway, that was out there for discussion. It came up. If no one wants to take any action on it, or,
Anybody want to pursue that one further? No? All right, we'll just move on then. Item number 29, Vice President of the City Council, Section 21, Counselor at Large, and discussion to provide how the Vice President is determined.
yeah. That was pointed out. It mentions the Vice President of the Council, which otherwise I found a very hard time finding anywhere else in the charter or the code as far as how that's selected or determined.
Yeah, I know when I read it over
Vice
too, I was kind of
President?
like, yeah. I know, it's like, how did I
How'd you
get
get
that?
to
How
that
did
point?
I missed a meeting, that's how I got that title, you know. That's true.
Hasn't the council traditionally gone to the longest tenured councilor, or not necessarily?
No,
No, it's just
No,
been a
I
vote,
think
voice
it's just
vote.
been, yeah,
but it's
someone makes a
kind
motion and-
of resulted in that when Ken was Vice President before me. He was the longest serving.
It's often the way it goes, but it
But
doesn't
it's
have to be
not.
that, yeah.
Doesn't have to be that way. No, I take that back. Ruth Ann served longer than Ken Rockman. But Ruth Ann didn't want it. So,
Because we really don't have a provision. I mean, the counselor, the charter in section 21 says the counselor at large is going to be the president of the council. Period. That's about it. So I don't know if
so it probably needs to be added into that language,
that,
don't you think?
I would think we would want to,
Yeah, I think we just added to that there should be a,
probably in section 21, that if that's what the recommendation would be, that it's, that's usually at the first annual meeting.
Yep.
When that's done, that at the first annual meeting, the council will elect a vice president.
Yep.
everybody okay with that? I think we need to, you have to have a vice president in case the pres is gone.
Yeah, they're all elected members of
Anyway.
the city council, so it's not like,
Right.
somebody would get in there that's, city manager.
Right,
Or something,
right.
so.
Elected position.
And then you get someone who has some affinity, who wants to do the job too, so that's important too.
I wonder if it fits well in 21, though. 21 talks about elective offices versus this is really an appointed office, isn't
I
it?
know, that's a legitimate,
So maybe someplace else.
That's probably why it's not in there, because nobody could figure out where
Under
it should
functions,
go.
it-
Number 23, maybe?
23.
Appointive offices?
that
Yeah,
would
it's not really an
probably be more
appointed.
appropriate.
What if you said in 27 were functions of the council, that the council shall elect a vice president, as part of the council, because that's part of the council's responsibility to choose a vice. is what we're
That would
kind of
work there
concluding,
too.
right?
Yep.
Yep.
Yeah, I think that, it could, yeah, it could even go into 21 if it's just worded right, so. I don't have a strong feeling either way on that. But I think you're right, it does, should be in somewhere.
Well, I was thinking 21 is where it confirms who the president is, how that's determined. So because this is a vice president, I just thought it might be easier to find if it was there. Doesn't matter, you know, so.
What if we recommend you play with the language on that and bring that back at the
Okay.
next meeting? I think it's more just how you word it.
Okay.
People okay with that? So we would not approve that tonight. We'll have him work on the language, and we would approve that at the next meeting. That makes sense, Roger?
Sure.
All right. Where are we at here? Moving on to the next page, salaries. Add a stipend for half or full-day functions for the mayor or city councilors. I think the discussion item here is that there was a survey done by city staff in 17, early 17, end of 2016. About half of the cities our size have stipends. Most counties have stipends. Some have for half a day, some have for full day. Some of the counselors still have full-time jobs. If they have to take time off from their work, they don't get compensated, obviously, from their job. So I think that's where this item is coming from and what people think about. We wouldn't say the dollar amount in here. Most of them aren't. And I do have the survey here if anybody wants to see it. Most of the stipends are in the $20 range up to the highest being 50. Average is about 35 or 35 probably on average. So I think the language change on section,
I think, Leslie,
Yeah.
that actually is something that could be done in the code. I think
could be
that-
done in code, but
Yeah,
I don't know if
I
it
don't
should be
think
code
you
or
really,
charter.
I don't think it would need to be in the charter. That's getting kind of,
It does not
Deal.
matter to me whether they do or don't, it's just, it's a neutral issue for me, but I would think it would go into the city code,
City code.
because then you could put it in the same section with the council compensation and setting that stuff up, because you're talking, you don't want, you definitely don't want to put the number in here, $20
Absolutely not,
a
no.
meeting, because then every time you want to change it to $25, you have to change your charter, so it's kind of,
My only thought was on the salary, it would say something, shall receive such salaries / stipend as may be fixed by the city council.
What if you change the word salary to compensation? Just make a broader term there.
that would encompass any
And the
compensation.
Yeah. But if you're saying we don't necessarily need it in there, Roger, right?
no, I don't, I think that the council absolutely would have the authority to vote on a stipend if it wanted to, and to include that. I think that frankly, the term salary is probably broad enough to encompass that.
I'm fine with it. I was one that put it on there because I was asked by a few other folks, so we can delete, if people are comfortable, we'll delete that one and move that over to the code, which is not our responsibility for this meeting. Okay? And number 12, section 48, add the word than.
Yeah, this is, the third line from the bottom, it needs to read, nor more than 45 days thereafter.
So moved.
Second.
Moving a second to add the word than. Any other discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. Looks like we've already dealt with number 13, right?
I think that what it's encompassed in the
other one?
motion.
Yep, I agree. So moving on to item number 14, clarify the requirement for a quorum of city councilors. That's came up a few times when we've been short councilors. Is it a majority of who is present, or is it always 3? So there's that particular question, and the person calling in will help us answer that, right?
Because I don't think this has come up at any meetings I've attended, but I would interpret this as saying 3. I mean, we've got 5 counselors, a majority is 3, but I understand how you could read this and say, well, there's 3 of us here, and 1 person had to go, so 2 of us, or, we started out with a quorum, or whatever. I mean, I don't think that's the
I
point
think
of
it did come up when we were in the school for a meeting, when we were short counselors that one
Yeah,
night.
yeah.
Because we asked you about that, because we weren't
Yep.
sure what that meant.
So, I mean, if this, just for clarification, if you wanted to have it read, 3 city councilors, I don't know that where we're gonna get, other than 5,
Yeah, I guess when I had originally, I don't know where I had seen this, but I thought the question was more, but a lesser number may adjourn a meeting. And when will that happen? Like you say, 3 members of the city council constitutes a quorum. They meet.
Right,
One person's house is burning and he leaves,
right.
or he or she leaves. That leaves 2 of them, and they didn't conclude the meeting. And I think it's just more or less common sense that less than a quorum can conclude a city council meeting in those rare situations. where there's-
Adjourn
I
it, but they
think- I
can't
think-
conduct business.
Right.
Yeah, but
I
they can't
think it-
conduct business, but they can
Right.
I
close.
mean, somebody has to leave because the house is on fire. The 2 remaining say, well, we're going to adjourn
Yeah,
until
Yeah.
next week or whatever.
Yeah.
So
I
I
mean,
think that's the.
that
point.
makes sense
But
to
if we
me.
have this discussion now, I think maybe there is some confusion, so maybe we do need to add a little more cleanup language to make it clear.
I think it's clear.
You think it's already
I-
clear?
Yeah,
Yeah, I kind of
I don't have any problem with it.
Are you saying that it's been thought that a majority of city councilors means a majority of the people present at the meeting?
Yeah, see, that's the question.
Yeah, I don't think it says that, but I
Is
assume.
it people that are present, or is it people that are elected that hold seats?
Well, I mean, if you have 1 person only who shows up, that's the majority. I mean, it can't be interpreted that way.
No.
Right, and it doesn't say that, it just says of city councilors.
Should it say a city councilor is present?
No, you don't want it to say
Yeah,
that.
we don't want it to
No.
say that.
No. Other thoughts on this one?
What's a scenario that this isn't clear?
I think at the school, when it was that situation, there's 3 counselors, 1 had to leave, and the question came up, can we continue to finish the agenda item? There was only a couple items left, approval of the claims, and there were just a couple items.
The way this reads, you can't.
And we,
But you could adjourn to.
You can
whenever want
adjourn,
to
but you
reconvene.
can't conduct any more business. Somebody has to go, you're done. Adjourn.
Right.
Yep. You have
we
to have
think
at
this
least
is
3.
clear enough, and it says that. I mean, if we're questioning it, I don't know if it is.
I don't hear anybody questioning. Is there anybody who thinks it says that this means anything less than a majority of the total number of city councilors?
Was this one of yours, Roger?
Yeah,
that you-
actually,
No, this
actually,
was-
when I read this, if 3 people showed up out of the 5, 2 people could decide what changes were gonna take place that night. And
Yes, 2.
when I read it that way, I thought, that's probably not a great idea.
No, it's not. It's very scary.
And so it
actually.
needs to be, the language needs to reflect, I don't know if it has to actually say number 3 in case someday there's 7 or something, but the language should reflect something to the effect of the total number elected, a majority of the total number elected seats or something like
Then,
that.
Bill, the mischief you're concerned about is we'd have to change the voting because, I mean, if 3 is enough to do business, 3 are there, and if the vote's 2 to 1.
2 to 1, it passes.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, you would have to change this to say,
Well, it
in
would,
the
it
event,
does now.
in the event you only had 3 counselors, at that point, everything has to be a unanimous vote?
Yeah.
Yeah.
This wording is normal. This would be standard. So the interpretation you have would be alternative facts.
Oh, I wouldn't go
Well, I
that
mean,
far.
no.
It is a-
I mean,
it is a
that's-
good
It's
point,
kind
though.
of scary to have
Yeah.
2
It is a good
people deciding, all right, we're gonna do this project, or we're gonna bond for this, or whatever. But-
Exactly.
But, on the other hand, you gotta do business.
Yeah.
Right.
And if you've got whatever, I mean, people who are gone and there's some emergency, you gotta
We've had a few where we've
I
had
suppose you
three,
could
but
always,
not
you
very
could always
often.
correct it at the next meeting most of the time if the other two showed up, said, what the hell are you
Have the
doing?
meeting the next, you know, you could have the meeting the next day, you know, you could call another meeting or something, but, you know, I would just.
Potentially, yeah.
So I guess
it's
my,
kinda-
my concern is I'm a lot more comfortable with three city councilors approving things
Right.
on the agenda
Than
than
two.
two.
And that's kind of how how we are.
You know,
we're-
so,
we're-
Yeah.
so are we good with, so I guess as a group, are we good with, hey, there might only be three there and two are gonna carry on business? Or do we not want that?
It would be like let's say the supermajority, you know, thing that you hear about at state and federal level where
Right.
it's up to you guys. You guys are the charter commission members, but this would be standard language, so it's.
Right.
Does it all the time, 88,
Are we okay with it?
Well, it kind of becomes where do you correct that potential problem? So if I'm one of the three city councilors, and we have a majority, and someone's asking me to vote on whether or not we're gonna approve the claims, and it's a standard motion we make every time, and I'm not gonna have a problem with it.
Yeah.
If someone's gonna ask me to do something controversial, I'm gonna say, I don't wanna vote on that tonight, there's only three of us here. So
And we do
the
that.
point being that the correction for the danger of having two people make that decision is not just in the procedure, it's also in the fact that I got constituents in the newspaper and everybody else who's gonna be on me if I take that step.
And I think that's actually happened. I think when there's been some really serious things and the
Sure.
counselor hasn't been able to attend, the council has decided, let's table this till the next meeting.
Oh, yeah.
We
we've
think
done that.
everyone
Yeah,
should be
absolutely, we've done that.
participating in it. so.
In the alternative, I've also seen where there were three there. Two were going to the left and one was going to the right, and the one going to the right votes with the majority, so the vote was 3-0. At the next meeting, if you voted in the majority, you can bring it back. If you vote in the minority, you historically can't bring it back.
It's always
So-
interesting, isn't it? I've always thought that rule was so weird.
I've seen that happen
Yeah.
numerous times.
Yeah.
So that's the other part. You say, I'm going to go along with you because next meeting, it's going to be on the agenda again, when there's going to be 5 of us there.
Brian, I know it's been done, the authority for that, something
Kinda
I'm
risky.
not aware of. Yeah, I mean, I don't know if that's in Robert's Rules of Order, which I don't know if we've ever
Yeah.
officially adopted.
If you
and
vote for
I think-
the
I-
motion,
I think the council can do whatever the heck they want to when it comes to that stuff.
well, I've heard it in Minnesota. I've seen it done in Minnesota. I've seen it done in Iowa. So this is kind of a
Yeah.
universal perception.
Again, I
anyway.
don't know what the authority is for it.
Yeah.
So are you thinking, Bill, that we should talk about making the quorum before? And the quorum, it doesn't have to be a majority, we can just set the quorum.
Well, fortunately, we have a nice odd number to start with.
Right.
You know, so the majority's, as it sits now, is always gonna be 3. So the question I would pose to the group is the majority of 3, which would be 2, adequate to conduct the city business? Or do we wanna make sure that there's always 3 affirmative votes
Well,
out of the
then
5?
you'd have
Right.
to reduce the quorum or increase it to 4.
Yeah.
Then to get anything done, if you have a split vote, nothing will happen. It would
Right.
still always require 3.
Hmm.
But there certainly can be some situations where you're not gonna have 4 counselors there.
Yep.
So it's weighing, is it better to just have to reschedule a meeting or to get things taken care of?
Yeah, we very seldom have meetings with 3 counselors, but it does happen fairly
Happens.
often with 4. Vacations and
Sure.
things that people have going on.
So you just have to add, if there's the quorum of 3, the only business that can pass is with a majority vote of 3.
Or
unanimous.
vote, or
Unanimous
yeah,
vote of
That would be the change you'd have to make.
That would cover it.
That would cover it.
So one person could stop 2 people
Veto
from
it,
making a
yeah.
decision.
'Cause you
Not a
could,
bad idea.
Because you could, I'll just I'm gonna pick on the dog leash.
Sure.
Since that was a ripe one, we could have had 2 that voted no, and 1 that was gonna vote yes, but if the other 2 had been there, there would have been a 3-2 yes. A completely different outcome on a, it's really those divided issues.
Yeah, you really, when you make business decisions and those made, you'd like to have 3 out of 5. No matter who's at the meeting,
Right.
at least have 3 out of 5. And that may not even, well, that would kind of cover that though, really.
In every
The
case.
2 absent
Yep.
wouldn't have made a
Wouldn't have
difference.
mattered. And maybe it's a mountain out of a molehill, I don't,
Well, it probably is, but when it's almost a timeless document, I mean, it could certainly come up.
So what people like to do with this
why don't we mull it over for a month?
table?
Yeah, do you want to come back to this
Yeah,
table?
let's table it, think about it, and we talked about an hour, hour and a half. We're at a little past an hour now, so we want to keep going for 20 minutes and then wrap her up. We're
Sure.
about halfway through, so we're doing pretty well. All right, let's move on to number 15. Procedures for ordinance and resolutions need to explain when either is used. Oh, I agree.
Okay, yeah, the question was, when do you use an ordinance and when do you use a resolution? I mean, the ordinance is kind of, it's our statutes, it's our operating set of laws for the city that apply now and in the future to what we think will be recurring situations. You can't park here, you gotta keep your yard clean, you have to do this. A resolution is just an important decision that the council makes that they really want to have confirmed, in writing as far as what exactly did they decide to do. I think the question I always had when I came on board is, when do you need a resolution and when do you need just a motion? And there really isn't any authority on that. It's just everyone I've talked to says the important stuff, you better do a resolution. But that, as far as why does the council, and if they're going to amend the ordinances, that's a fairly complicated procedure, and there's publication and readings and things like that. So that's just the explanation. So I don't know that, again, it's in the charter, procedure on ordinances, and then 65 ahead of that is how to proceed on resolutions and motions. So,
The frustration, I think, probably is it happens at every council meeting. Because it's just hard, and there's so many different motions and so many different resolutions, and you forget which one's which when you're moving along, and
Well, some are required by law, though.
Right.
Like, when the city receives a donation, you see the Park and Rec donation list tonight, that has to be by resolution, And so we've got a cheat sheet that basically says, here's the things that are just by motion, and here's the things by resolution. And even we sometimes get fouled up, and it's a motion, and we have to come back and actually get a resolution on it. So it's not.
although I did ask Reg where that came from, and he was kind of vague.
well, it's probably nothing we can do about it. Motions are quicker, you can move along a little faster than if you had to do a roll call on every single motion that comes before us, but.
Well, I think generally Nicole is doing a really good job of getting that distinction, because there are things that come up where someone's going to want to go back and look at what exactly did the council decide. And if it's in a resolution, it's there.
It's all gold.
Right, you got it. So there isn't any question. So.
Yeah, the only thing I thought, the only answer that'd be to make everything a resolution, but that would just lengthen your
Oh,
meetings.
that's a lot of extra work. It's
Yeah,
just
so I
not
don't think there is a
necessary.
resolve here. I think we have to keep doing what we're doing.
On 68, though, the last time we went through the charter, we talked about putting things and how we actually do them as compared to maybe somebody's pie-in-the-sky process. Every resolution shall be presented in writing and read in full. We don't do that. Very rarely do we have the resolution in writing, much less that we read the resolution
Never
in
read
full.
it.
We never do it. We just offer the resolution, waive the reading, and on with the show.
Well, technically, it's still supposed to be in writing, because that you can't waive according to
The
this.
vast majority of them do get put in writing, maybe not
It's-
before the meeting, but they
No.
do.
After the
And they're
fact.
signed and.
Yeah.
So
Well, it says
every other
presented
city.
in writing, so I think really it's supposed to be written in advance, but that is a lot of extra work.
I think there was a point in time where we did do them all in writing prior to the meeting, and for whatever reason, we've fallen out of that, whether we're not getting the information we need to do it, or it just isn't.
Well, one thing I think that
Time,
has
yeah.
made a big difference is with the format for the council agendas, which is, I think, a really good one. It's there. I mean, so the councilors know what, if they want to amend it, they can, but when they're presenting a resolution, they've got exactly the language, at least the key
It's there,
language
it's just
there.
not in the formal
And it
resolution
didn't
form.
used to be that way, so I think that takes care of some of that concern.
Could we, I hadn't thought about that, but could we get rid of that word as far as the reading of since we don't read them anyway? We never read them. We always waive the reading, every single time.
I don't know when one of them has ever been read.
Exactly, so can we change that language?
Sure, if you wanted to.
The only concern I would have is the general public doesn't, maybe not know what the resolution, but we're waiving the reading anyway,
Yeah.
so.
This is the first community I've worked for where the resolution was not included. Every other city, if you had a resolution, it would be typed up and it's ready to go, and that night, the mayor or the council president would sign. Nome is the first community where you show up and they waive the
Well,
reading
it's
and
gonna have
there's
to be
no
done at some
resolution in
point, I
sight.
Yeah,
guess,
they're
anyway.
done at some point, and they're all assigned a number in the order of approval, and it's there, and it's easy to put together if we have to. There's many resolutions that have to be done anyway to go with different
Right.
paperwork for grant work or for different state
Right.
authorizations and whatnot. So a lot of them do get done anyway. I'm not gonna say all the donation ones get typed up all the time, but
And we'll have a sample resolution that might have came with some state documents. Here's the sample, and then we put it in our format, which doesn't look nothing like, the sample. So what the public saw versus what we end up with are relatively two separate documents.
Did you have a recommendation, Roger, on how you would reword that?
Well, it could just read every resolution shall be presented in writing before a vote is taken thereon.
Yeah,
What about something like provided in draft? Meaning you might not have the exact one in front of you because you're gonna go through some discussion and stuff. Perhaps that would change it.
Because it could always be amended anyway.
we're probably just gonna have to ask for them to be in writing, I'm assuming. They probably should be if that's the city business and city documents.
If we can put the issue sheet together to get it into the agenda, we should be able to have, if nothing else, a sample resolution.
Right. Roger, you wanna work on that one?
Sure.
And bring that one back? Do we want a motion on that, or do you wanna just work on that and then we'll,
Why don't you see what I come up with?
okay,
So you can,
work on some language,
Yep.
thank you. Okay, item number 16, requirement of 2 public readings of, this is Roger's favorite one.
Oh.
I don't think we
This
should
one is
touch
gonna
this one.
happen,
Let's move
yeah.
on to number 17. No, this is certainly an important one. Whenever we have a public reading of an ordinance, the requirement is that Roger reads them into the record. One of them was over 45 minutes long in reading that into the record. And if you ever watched those on television, wow, it's pretty rough.
and I know that, the staff is working on revising the zoning ordinance. That will literally be hours probably to read that.
About
into the
days.
record, yeah. So,
And when you talk about a dock or a land location, block 1 of lot 2 of side 3 of, it's like I'd like to know anybody that knows how to read those, because there's probably a few, but 1 or 2. I would like to see something that would require the city attorney to discuss what it is, though, so people need to know what that's all about. So could we have something like the city attorney?
well, there's a couple comments, Les. One
Yeah, okay.
is that we don't currently have the requirements. This statute says that for an ordinance, a new ordinance, it's supposed to be, if we have a city website, it's supposed to be posted there. We don't have that requirement in our charter. So I think that's something we should do. Also, if someone is on a list to ask for copies, they're entitled to get it. We have to send it to them. So I'd be suggesting some language to clean that up a little bit. Otherwise, I think one thing it's important to retain is probably presenting the ordinance twice, because this is a big step. You're changing the
Yep.
city law, and you're not just doing it, impulsively. So it still would require two moments or times of discussion and consideration. And presumably it would be discussed. I guess I'm not sure if anyone has any suggestions on how to do that, because, the ordinance is going to have a legal impact, so the city attorney could be having some comments, but it might be more engineering or some other department.
What was the reason that it had to be read anyway? What does it come from
I
historically?
looked and looked, Linda, and I could not find any requirement. I'm assuming it was back in the day if people couldn't read, or whatever, you didn't have,
Maybe.
television, that this would be a way that everyone would have a chance to hear the law. I suppose like
The
the town
ordinance was a
crier.
paragraph long.
Yeah. Right, and you were dealing with zoning ordinances that went on
Right.
for pages and pages.
All horses in town shall be shod.
Yeah, yeah.
I still would like, I think, at the council meeting, that, when we have the general public watching these, having some explanation of what it is that we're approving, versus just say we're approving the particular ordinance in front of us.
Something like a thorough
What about
summary
an
of
executive
the-
summary?
Presented
Yeah,
by this,
something-
presented by you probably, I'm thinking. it
Just
should come
by
from the-
someone, so it's presented so that the gist of it is out there.
Yes,
So it's
right.
not just, okay, we got ordinance, P28, all right, we
Right, we're
considered
approving.
it, move on to the next
Yeah.
item,
Because if you're watching from home, you're not going to have a clue what you're talking
Yeah.
about. Maybe even if you're sitting in the audience, you might not have a clue.
yeah,
So
okay.
I think that has to
Why
be.
don't I see if I can come up with
I guess I'd be reluctant to point out one person that has to do that.
No,
Just
That'd
in
be the one
case.
time both city attorneys can't make it, and
but I just
City
think
attorney, city
somehow
staff?
that it has to be presented, that
yeah,
a
it
summary
has to be presented.
presented.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
So you'll work on that particular one?
Yep.
Awesome.
And then, so we still have the ordinance in its entirety available for some type of public viewing before those
It'll be on
meetings?
the
It is-
agenda.
It is, it's on the agenda, and then it's posted 10 days before final approval.
Okay.
Okay, item number 17, the official paper, regularly provided and published in the city. What if the Journal would go out of business? What? What would we do in that situation?
In either case, you would still appoint an official newspaper. It could be the Mankato Free Press, or it could be the Portland Gazette, it could be the Cambria Crouton, whatever. There are many cities that don't have a newspaper within their boundaries, but they still have an official
The
newspaper.
problem is the current language says it has to be printed and published in the city. And right now, it's not printed in the city, so
Right.
we're in violation
So
of
we
it
need
right
to,
now.
we need to adjust that,
Oh,
yeah.
right.
Yeah.
So, could the official paper be read on radio?
No.
I think the point is to actually have some format where it's on paper, it's in writing.
Yeah.
And I realize we're getting away from that.
Big time.
But, yeah, and I think that
We're
just.
still required to publish in print. There's some things we just can't.
Right.
get
Oh, yeah,
away
yeah,
from at this
there are all
point in
sorts
time
of
until the
state laws
state-
that
yeah.
have to be published, where we have to publish things in the paper, period.
What about, boy, this would probably cost a lot, but mailing to all the city residents?
Now, there are things like legal notices and,
Yeah.
things like that where it's,
Well, there's no journal. We're talking about a no,
If there was
well, then
one.
we would appoint, we'd do the Free Press or the
Yeah.
Lafayette Ledger or whatever we would be doing. We could say that's our official paper, and I know it.
Well,
Could
and
it
as
say
long as we
official?
appoint it and print it in the paper, it doesn't mean we can't still put it on the website or on, as time moves forward and technology changes.
Yeah.
We can still do those
And-
things. We just have to officially appoint
And just
them.
like the provision I read before, I think more and more, the state is requiring cities to put things on their websites. So, you know, that's. it's
So you
gonna
could
be out
just
there.
delete regularly printed and published in the city. If you took that statement out, it'd be covered.
Yeah, I think we could.
Yes. Yes.
Frankly, the journal's probably not printed here either. That's
Well, it
shipped
hasn't
out.
been for 40 years.
Okay.
When I was city administrator in Eagle Lake, our official paper was the Madison Lake newspaper, wasn't the Mankato. That was the paper of choice for Eagle Lake residents. That's what they wanted.
Got a motion on that?
Yep.
We could, if you want to just clean that up.
Yep.
That's a.
So moved.
Rick, you want to make that a motion? See what change?
So moved.
Mike did.
Moved, okay.
Yep.
Second?
I'll second it.
Any other discussion points on that? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. I wonder if this would be a good spot to stop, just based, the next item looks like it potentially be longer than 7 minutes. So I'm going to make the executive decision to end here. Do we have a new meeting set up? Did we, so we need to do that yet as well?
I don't think we have a new one set up yet, but
No, we haven't set,
If we set up 2 in a row, we do not.
in the past, it's always been kind of take the lead off the city attorney's
Yep,
office.
that was my next
That
question.
If we got our research and all that stuff, then once we get that done, we call another meeting.
So Roger, how much time?
if we could do like 3 or 4 weeks out again.
Do a month?
Yeah,
I'm fine with that.
appreciate that.
Would we prefer, I didn't think to bring my schedule, but do we want to do a doodle poll and figure it
I
out
think
that
so.
way, or
Yeah.
try
That
and
works.
With summer
That works
coming up,
pretty well.
yeah, that
Not
might
think
be
I'm out of
good.
vacation.
Coming up, yeah, yeah.
Summer's
Well,
here.
it's coming
All
up
right,
for
we'll
some
put-
of
We're
us. not
halfway
now.
through.
Put city
Speak
staff,
for
but maybe we
yourself.
want to schedule 2 meetings this time, and then that way we'll just have to get 2 dates set done if possible.
Well, I don't know, I think it's easy enough to, my
One at a time.
preference would be one at a time,
Right.
because things happen.
We got
and-
more than half done, so we did pretty
Yeah.
well, because there's a couple items you'll see coming up that we already talked about and we resolved.
Yep.
So we did really well, so thank you all very much for your attendance tonight and your patience. This is not the most exciting stuff, but it is important stuff.
Do we want to do this on the same night that the city council meets, or?
No.
I just thought I'd throw it out.
Not every meeting.
Because,
Might only
you
be
know,
one more
we were
left.
lucky tonight, it was a short agenda, but you never know. And if that council meeting goes until 6:15, I really hate to have everybody in this commission.
Yeah, but we have
you
some
know.
control over that. If there's a huge topical item, we can move it off to the
Well,
next.
if there's 3 councilors there, you get down to 2.
I have full trust in Nicole to get that set, so. Meeting adjourned. Thanks, everybody.